Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Becoming Anchored podcast. I am Lauren Jackson. This is our other host, Laura Deneen. We're so glad that you're here with us today. We're excited to jump in and talk about the content that we have. A quick little intro about us. So Laura and I are part of a group private practice called Anchored Counseling Company here in Brentwood, Tennessee. We specialize in working with eating disorders, disordered eating, body image issues, and then as well as anxiety, depression, life transition, grief and loss. So kind of a little bit along the spectrum of different concerns. So we see all ages, all genders, and we really love what we do. And we're super excited to have started this podcast to connect with you guys in a different way and share some of our lives with you in a different way than just sitting with clients. So anyways, a quick little disclaimer, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only. It's not meant to be your therapy. So if you do find that as you're listening and engaging with the content that you may benefit from therapy, either reach out to us. We'd love to connect with you if you're local. If not, find somebody local to you who's licensed.
Yeah, welcome. We are so thrilled to have you with us on the show today. We've got a wonderful topic, but if you're new to the show and this is your first episode, welcome. We're just so thankful to have you, and this has just been such a joy engaging with you all on this platform, and it's been really life-giving for both myself and for Lauren. So, Lauren actually had the idea to start the Becoming Anchored podcast a little over a year ago, and we've really just jumped in, and we were actually telling someone on the show yesterday that we've really just kind of figured it out as we go, and we don't do a lot of preparation for these episodes. In full transparency, it's really more of a conversation. And so, again, if you're new to the show, we really speak from first and foremost, our lived experiences as human beings. We go through hard things in life and things that are trying and difficult for us, and we also want to share in our joy and some of the things that we've learned along the way. And we have the gift of sitting with clients on a regular basis, and we just both adore that work, and we adore the clients that we work with, and it's just such a gift. And so that's really the purpose of the Becoming Anchored podcast, is to not only share about our lived experiences first and foremost as humans, but also as therapists. So thanks for being here. Let's go ahead and dive into this content. So y'all, we have got a really, really wonderful topic that we're going to be sharing more about today and speaking on. So we are going to be talking about why uncertainty is so hard and what to do about it. And so this felt really important for us to dedicate an episode to, because I don't know about you, but I certainly have struggled with uncertainty in my own life, and we see it quite frequently in our clients that present to Anchored. And uncertainty is incredibly hard to sit with, and it's also incredibly common. So it's those two pieces, right? A lot of us do not like uncertainty, and speaking from my own perspective and my own journey of, working on my own mental health and anxiety and all that's entailed, uncertainty is it's incredibly hard. And so we wanted to dedicate a full episode to ways to sit with uncertainty and ways to really challenge yourself if you are facing uncertainty. It's not if, it's when, right? So we all are going to face something that causes uncertainty or that is uncertain, and life as a whole is uncertain, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. I think just to kind of bounce off of kind of what you were just saying and introing the topic, Laura, I think that is life, right? Like there's something uncertain about kind of every day that we wake up. We don't exactly know for certain what will happen. We can know our schedule. We can know what's planned. We can know, things that are plan to unfold, if you will, but still, at the end of the day, there are things that can happen that we aren't expecting, especially if we are in a season where there is something difficult going on that holds a greater weight of uncertainty. And for whatever reason, life is so uncertain, yet we as humans are so deeply wired to want to know and want to have all the answers and all the facts because it's safe and it's comfortable and it is more secure. And we come into this world needing that. We come into this world needing safety and security and certainty. And hopefully, maybe we typically do get that when the mom is there or the caregiver is there. That's not everybody's story, right? And we feel with you in that. And if that's you, then we have deep compassion for you in that. So yeah, the topic of this conversation today really is, okay, if life is so uncertain, like we're saying that it is, and we're so wired for certainty, what do we do? What do we do with that? And how do we cope with that? How do we manage that? Because, I think that there can be some of us who are perhaps in ways more wired, personality-wise, to seek or have an urgency or a need for certainty. And then, of course, our lived experiences can impact our maybe urgency for that certainty. We talk about this a lot on the podcast and on the episodes up until now, is this idea of like just building more awareness or insight around what my tendencies are when I notice things are uncertain and I'm really trying to figure out what is coming next or what is going to happen or what the thing is that I'm like needing to know or to figure out. So that awareness piece, I don't know, that always feels like one of the first things that comes to mind when we kind of dig into one of these topics.
Yeah, totally. And even just asking yourself the question of like historically too, right? Like when I have faced uncertainty in the past, how have I responded? And I know it's not always this black and white, but has it been adaptive or what we would call healthy, or is it maladaptive or unhealthy? Do I notice that I'm more likely to get irritable with my partner or more likely to shut down or withdraw? So what kind of is that behavioral piece? That's that insight component that is really crucial, like Lauren was talking about. And yeah, I mean, just even on a neurobiological level, like you talked about, Lauren, seeking certainty is part of the human experience. And I fully agree with you that for some of us, it is a lot harder to learn to embrace uncertainty than others. Case in point, my husband, I know that when he's had things in his life that are uncertain, it might bother him, but maybe it doesn't bother him as much as it would me. And I've done a lot of my own shame comparison work, right? So I'm certainly not saying sitting in shame as I'm saying this, right? I'm actually not. But it's more of that awareness piece around when we're both faced with uncertainty. I typically am going to have more distress around the uncertainty itself, whatever topic or subject or life circumstance that revolves around. And so just having an abundance of compassion for my own self, knowing that uncertainty historically has been difficult for me. And some of that, like Lauren was saying, can be because of my genetic wiring. For some of you listening, it might be because of your own stories or perhaps trauma that has been interwoven in your stories. So there's lots of different reasons as to why uncertainty can be hard from a biological and environmental perspective. So lots here, and really, so step number one, just to recap all the things that we've been saying, is raising awareness around how you respond to uncertainty, whether that's in the present day or historically speaking. And I'll add to that maybe just noticing, so we know that uncertainty oftentimes is linked to a response that involves some sort of fear or anxiety. So noticing starting to notice where you experience that in your body is going to be really rich and fruitful information for you, because as therapists, we are constantly, reminding our clients of this. And honestly, I'm constantly reminding myself of this, but our emotions show up in our bodies first and foremost. And so really looking at, okay, when I am in a season of uncertainty, or maybe I'm waiting for, an employment offer, or I'm waiting to get pregnant, or whatever, I think waiting can often be, interwoven with uncertainty. It's really looking at, where do I experience those physical sensations, those emotions in my body, and maybe that tells me and gives me more information that I am in a season of uncertainty itself. So starting to kind of link those two, naming it. So that's that thought process, and then that kind of embodied process as well.
Laura, I'm curious, because I would say I agree with you. Just in my own personal experience, uncertainty tends to be hard for me. I notice that whatever it is that doesn't feel black and white, I can become anxious, and anxiety for me can shows up in different ways in my body, my heart, my stomach. My thoughts kind of start turning and burning, and I get a little crazy or whatever. I get a little bit out of touch with reality, and maybe some of you listening can kind of relate to that. So yeah, like Laura, historically, uncertainty has been dysregulating for me. So Laura, I'm curious, and I'll share my experience with this as well, but like, what have you tended to do when you have experienced uncertainty that like does really distress you? Like what has historically been like dysfunction? Because one of the points that I'm making here is that we can, when we don't have yet a muscle that we've built to like tolerate uncertainty and not having answers, it can come out sideways a little bit, and that can foster like dysfunctional behaviors, so to speak. So I'm just curious, like what has shown up for you?
Oh my gosh, I'm like, how many answers do you want? Do you want 5 or do you want 100? And I hope for those of you listening that's validating for you. And I have humor around some of the things that I've struggled with. It's certainly not to make light of it, but it does support me towards continued growth to have some humor. And so when I'm laughing on the show, it's not to make light of struggles, but it's more to facilitate my own compassion towards myself. I really like to poke fun at myself. I think it brings a certain kind of levity to situations that can be really difficult. So I did want to kind of have a sidebar there. Like when I'm laughing about this, it's because I see a lot of myself in what you're talking about right now. But yeah, I mean, I think when I'm struggling with uncertainty, again, I have that insight to notice, okay, is my heart fluttering? I typically feel a sense of urgency, and that goes hand in hand with uncertainty. And now there are situations that are urgent, right? So something that pertains to your physical health, urgent. When you're in a dangerous situation, or someone you love is in a dangerous situation, urgent. But the reality is uncertainty and urgency go together in the sense that our bodies can respond and try to make sense of these situations that are uncertain. And that's what Lauren was talking about before, where we're trying to seek that certainty. And the reality is that not everything, and oftentimes what we're experiencing uncertainty around is not actually urgent. And we're not in dangerous situations, right? So this is where that first and foremost, that cue to me of like, I will start to ask myself, and this is kind of that how-to, so I'm answering the second part of your question, but I'll start to really pause and stop and ask myself if this truly is an urgent situation. And then it's either going to be a yes or no answer. And then once I have the answer to that question, I can move forward with hopefully a healthy decision. And then when I'm starting to also ask myself, and I know we've talked a lot about this, just even not on the show today, but when I start to ask myself what if or unanswerable questions, those are also kind of ways that cue me into just noticing, oh, okay, I might be struggling with some uncertainty. And when I'm talking about this idea of an unanswerable question, to give you an example of what this might be like, what is the weather going to be like 10 years from now? It's like, we don't have the answer to that question. And me trying to figure out what the answer is just not fruitful. It's not productive. It's not realistic. But yet I'm trying to spend all this time figuring out what the weather is going to be 10 years from now. And I'm, instead of, doing something else with my time. So it costs us our energy, our resources, might cost us time with loved ones. So those are kind of two different ways. First and foremost, for me, at least how I experience uncertainty oftentimes is associated in some way, shape, or form with a sense of urgency when something is not actually urgent, and then asking myself questions that are not super answerable. And I guess meteorologists have gotten a lot better at like predicting weather patterns, but I don't think that they are like 10 years ahead of time at this point in time. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that point that you made, the asking unanswerable questions, because I think that that's probably a really, really common thing that a lot of us do in times of uncertainty, is we do start to ask questions and we try and answer them ourselves. We try and come up with some kind of solution that will provide a sense of certainty that maybe is not rooted in reality or grounded in like the present moment. And that can, I know, Laura, we were talking about this earlier, but that cycle and that pattern of asking those questions internally, trying to seek out answers, and that becoming a part of how you cope with uncertainty, that can then, from a neurobiological standpoint, create these like neural pathways that then become a go-to way of like dealing with that uncertainty that, like you said, turns out to not really be helpful. Right? They're not helpful questions to ask. They take your time, they take your energy. They may even increase your uncertainty. They may even increase your anxiety.
Absolutely.
So it perpetuates it, right? And so, it's the classic, like, the thing that you're afraid of, when you avoid that fear, the fear gets bigger, right? And so, in the therapy space, in the way that we're trained to really help people walk through that type of thing, fear, uncertainty, anxiety, is really exposing ourselves to the thing that feels so big and so scary and so uncertain, to experience the reality of maybe how small it actually is. So yeah, those questions, I mean, I can certainly relate to that. Just like a loop of like questions that it's like, I don't have the answers to, but
yeah, and that word that you use, loop, that just feels so poignant today for today's episode, because that's what it is. It's really this looping thought process. So the clinical verbiage that we would introduce to a client is rumination. And again, it is that attempt, this is that psychoeducation piece, right? It's an attempt to solve a problem or to try to get certainty, even if that's not actually a possibility. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm just with you, and lots here.
Yeah, one other thought too that's kind of coming to mind as we're talking about like that rumination piece, and just the ways that we can get stuck, or the dysfunctional maybe behaviors or things that we can do to try and cope with the uncertainty. If we kind of go back to the beginning of I was about to say session, the beginning of our episode, where we were talking about, okay, first and foremost, and what we do first and foremost with our clients too, is let's build awareness. Like, let's bring our awareness and our attention back to like ourself and what's going on in our internal process, because chances are, maybe whatever dysfunction is showing up, that it's trying to help you cope with the discomfort of the uncertainty, whether that is ruminating on these questions, or, I don't know, perfectionism, or, I mean, it could be all kinds of things. Maybe you have an eating disorder. Maybe you have OCD and that gets really loud and really big, right? Like things like that. Chances are those things are getting in the way of you knowing what you're feeling. And when we know what we're feeling, when we are embodied and we are connected with, like what Laura was saying, our internal cues and those emotions that show up in our body first, then we can know what we need. And then if we know what we need, then we can get that need met. And then we are probably connecting with people. We're probably staying in our value system. We're probably living more in the present moment, and we're just taking care of ourselves. And so, if I'm in a season of uncertainty, and I'm waiting on this thing that I really want, and it seems like everybody else around me has it, and that is really sad and really upsetting to me. And so I go and and just spend all my money. Every day I just go and like buy things because that makes me feel good, right? Then what I'm probably covering up is like grief. What I'm probably covering up is hurt and need to be seen and need to be, comforted and all of those things. And so not that the behavior is necessarily inherently like wrong or bad, and it's probably getting in the way of the core root of what's going on, which is I'm really sad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we get so good. We talk a lot about this on the show, but we get so good at avoiding our feelings. Mm-hmm. And so avoiding the fear or the hurt or the sadness that might be there, uncertainty, and trying to do all these things in response to uncertainty can be a way to emotionally avoid. So I was actually going to ask you of an example for what you're talking about, and you just illustrated that beautifully. So thank you for sharing. I mean, I think just to kind of tag along with what you're saying too, one thing that I'm consistently talking to clients about is really looking at not only their relationship to uncertainty itself, but also their relationship to discomfort. Because part of tolerating uncertainty and exposing ourselves to uncertainty is really leaning into discomfort and setting expectations. If you're listening to the show today, it's really looking at like, what are my expectations with uncertainty? We're not here to tell you that sitting with uncertainty is fun or like rainbows and sunshine and butterflies. It's not. And so really looking at, okay, what are, first and foremost, my expectations around sitting with uncertainty, embracing uncertainty, and recognizing that I'm most likely going to be uncomfortable when I do embrace uncertainty, and I don't have to make all of this meaning out of the discomfort itself, right? So what I mean by that is I don't have to like tell myself that I'm a terrible person, or I don't have to go down this like shame spiral, or I don't have to tell myself that I can't do this, or whatever other meaning that wraps around the uncertainty. That I think is really important too for our listeners. And honestly, this is a reminder for my own self, but just because we're uncomfortable or just because we're uncertain doesn't mean that we have to draw these conclusions about the uncertainty or the discomfort themselves. One thing that's really helped me is like, and you know this, Lauren, because I know I've gone to your office and talked to you about this, but if I am in a season of uncertainty, or if I'm struggling with maybe more fear or more anxiety on any given day, naming it and really just being like, yep, okay, it's here. And that's it. In that moment, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to really like try to figure out all the ins and outs of the uncertainty itself. I can just let it be there and then make a decision after some of that anxiety has passed. So that has really helped me too.
The making meaning of the discomfort or the uncertainty is in some ways similar to those unanswerable questions, right? And creating a story in our minds about what's going on. Well, this must be happening to me, or I must not be getting this thing I want or am longing for because I'm this bad person, or I did this bad thing, or whatever, right? That's us trying to make meaning of something that isn't helpful and perpetuates the dysfunction of trying to cope with the uncertainty in a way that isn't real. Like it's not grounded in reality, and just perpetuates shame, right? Which doesn't create any kind of change.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, uncertainty is just, it's a part of life, like we've talked about, and we're not here to tell you that it's easy or that it's comfortable. But when we can move from living in our past selves or our future selves back to our present selves, that's where the rich work happens around like, okay, I'm here right now in this moment. Like Lauren was talking about before, what do I need in this moment? And recognizing that doubt, uncertainty, discomfort, those are a part of our lives, and that's part of the human experience. And so my hunch is that for those of you listening, uncertainty might be causing you, or maybe historically has caused you pain and suffering, and we're here to tell you that there are really tangible therapeutic ways to start to work with uncertainty itself. It doesn't mean that, just because you have maybe more of a proclivity or more of a sensitivity to uncertainty that you have to suffer for the rest of your life. That's certainly not the point of this episode. There are really amazing strategies that work around this exposure and embracing uncertainty. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for all your wisdom. I love talking to Lauren on this show, and I'm sure that you guys can just hear how wise she is. So thank you, Lauren. Well, y'all know that we close with homework and an affirmation. So I am going to give your homework. Lauren's going to give your affirmation for this episode. But your homework from me is starting to examine your relationship to uncertainty. All right, so almost externalizing it outside of you and really looking at, historically, what are times when you have faced uncertainty in the present day? What's going on in your life that is maybe increasing your sense of uncertainty, and really looking at those responses that you have to uncertainty itself, and how would you maybe like to respond instead of the perhaps way that you are responding, if that is an unhealthy way of coping. So that's your homework after today's episode. Lauren, do you want to close with our affirmation?
Yeah. I don't have any amazing novel words by any means, but I think I just want to encourage you all that maybe even if you're in a place of uncertainty right now, or a season of uncertainty right now, that you are capable of staying present even when it feels like you don't have the answers that you want. So there's a challenge in that as well, practice staying present, and I want to encourage you that you're capable of doing that.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks so much for being here, y'all, for this topic on uncertainty. I know it's an important one, so we are thinking of you as you challenge yourselves and as you grow in your relationship with uncertainty. We will see you next time. Take care.